Hi, this is Kathi Quinn with Floriani. Floriani is a division of R&K Distributing, and I want to welcome you to this week's Project of the Week. I was just in Fairview Heights, Illinois at Jackson's, and we were having a hands-on class. We had a great time this weekend, and I had a customer come up to me and show me a picture that she had on her cell phone of a piece of gingham fabric with a cross-stitch design on it. And it brought back so many good memories. When I was a little girl, the way I learned to cross stitch was on a piece of gingham fabric, and we turned it into an apron. And that's how we learned. And she said, is there a way to duplicate this in the software? Well, remember, I'm all about the hoop. And with everything retro, and this just brought back great memories. So I thought this would be a fun lesson for this week's Project of the Week. Now, the first thing I did is I needed to find some gingham fabric, so I pulled some out of my stash. That's the closest I've got to gingham right now. Of course, we used either the red and white, the blue and white, the yellow and white, traditional gingham fabric. But I've got something that'll suffice for our exercise. And I measured the squares on it, and they were 1/8 of an inch. That is 3 millimeters. So the first thing I needed to do was set up my grid system here, just like that gingham fabric. So I'm going to put my cursor along my ruler bar and right mouse click. Now I'm going to go to grid settings, and I'm going to first of all, I'm not in metric, so that's not going to help me. I'm going to right mouse click, and I'm going to tell it metric. Then I'm going to right mouse click and go to grid settings, and I've set this at 3 millimeters. So I also picked snap to grid. This is going to be important for this exercise because we want to make sure they fall exactly in the squares of that fabric. So we want our lines not to be wavy. Okay, now we're ready. Now just so you, just for your mental, your visual, I'm going to come to my load backdrop tool, which is my icon right here on the left hand toolbar. This is when you're loading JPEG images. I took a picture of the fabric I have, and I'm going to load that just for your visual. This is what I'm talking about. So our little X's were done in the squares, and that's how we did all of our pretty stuff. So I'm going to go ahead and get a new piece of paper. I just wanted to make you remember what we were doing. Now with a new piece of paper, I've got that same grid. So what I'm going to do is come up to my line tool. Now remember, this is all vectorite, so these will be perfect, and we have that snap to grid. So I can come in here and I can pretend this is my gingham fabric, and I know even if my hand's a little shaky or a little wavy, it's going to snap to the corners of these grids, so I know these are going to be perfect. And I'm just going to kind of wing it here. Remember, I'm the one that can't even draw stick figures to scale, so just hang in here with me, and we'll just play. Okay, that'll get us at least where we're going here. Now I'm not going to close this all the way. I'm going to get close, and then I'm going to come over here to my left-hand toolbar to my close shape because I want that to close perfectly. So there it is. There's my shape. Now I'm going to come down along the bottom to my one-click wonders to my cross-stitch icon, and I'm going to left mouse click. And now that has filled that in with cross stitches. Now the size defaults to 3 millimeters, which is nice because that was my fabric. But what if my fabric had measured 5 millimeters or 6 millimeters? I would have made this a 1/4 of an inch grid or a 6 millimeter grid, and then I would have changed this to 6 when I came in here. Now the next thing I want is I want this to look like those old hand done ones, so I'm going to put 3 repeats because we used to use 3 strands of embroidery floss for that, and I'm going to apply. So now in effect I have created that same exact pattern in my software that I used to do on that fabric. Now I'm going to do one other thing. I'm going to right mouse click and copy. I'm going to right mouse click and paste, and I'm going to change the color here because I want a little outline around this. So I'm going to come over here to my run stitch, and I'm going to left mouse click, and I'm going to turn that into a run. Maybe. There we go. turned into a run. Now I want that to be a bean, and I want it to have 3 repeats, just like my cross stitch, and I want it to be 3 millimeters, so it's the length of my squares. Apply. So now I have affected that. It's a perfect little cross stitch design to go right on that gingham fabric. But now how am I going to know that I've got my gingham fabric hooped correctly? Well, we're going to come in here and go to our artwork shapes. I'm going to select the rectangle, and I'm going to draw myself a rectangle here. And I'm going to change the color of it, and then I'm going to make it a run stitch. Now what I will do, a couple of things. I'm going to select my cross stitch. I'm going to hold down my control key and select my outline as well, so they will both be selected. And I'm going to come up to this top toolbar, and I'm going to left mouse click on group. Then when I take this square that I've done down here and it doesn't matter, and I turn it into a run, I'm going to come down to the bottom. I'm going to make this a run as well. I am going to then select everything by selecting all items in my sequence view, and I'm going to come up to my alignment tool up here on the top toolbar. The last one, I'm going to center. And there it is. It's centered within my fabric. There we go. Now what's going to happen is I'm going to come in here next. I'm going to select this. I'm going to right mouse click, and I'm going to tell it to move to the first. I want that square to stitch out first. So what I'm going to do is make sure this square, all of this, we're going to select all items again, and I'm going to nudge this using all of my control keys, my arrow keys, well, maybe. There we go. Until it lines up exactly on those grid lines. Okay, my 3 millimeter grid lines. I want to know that this is right perfect on those 3 millimeter lines. So we've got it great. Now what will happen is I will hoop up Floriani Perfect Stick Tearaway. It's partially water soluble, partially fiber, so it's perfect for this stitch type. It also has a sticky top. So I'm going to hoop it shiny side up. I'm going to score the paper, tear it away, and then I'm going to stitch out my placement square. Now I will trim my gingham fabric to make sure I have straight cuts along the gingham, and I will stick this down perfectly within this square. Once it's there, I then will turn around and go ahead and stitch out my cross stitch design. How wonderful and how cool is that? So I hope you enjoyed this week's lesson on doing the old retro cross stitch on gingham fabric. This is a lot of fun. This is something fun to do with a grandchild, because remember, I remember all these things from my grandmothers. So it would be a lot of fun to do this with one of your grandchildren. So I want to thank you for coming to this week's Project of the Week, and I look forward to seeing you again next week.